Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer, and welcome to my mid-year deep dive. For those unfamiliar with what the deep dive is, it's a look into two things. One, something within the channel and or even behind the scenes regarding my life. Secondly, into a lesser known component of the channel, and that is the gaming decathlon, where I treat each game as if we are playing the decathlon or participating in the decathlon. So each game is scored out of 1,000, and I have scoring systems for each. I track those scores as I go along, and this is the place where you're going to find a breakdown of how the series are going and where we're at with those scores. And often this is that place where you're going to find out how that scoring is really taking place. I do use my Twitter account to give weekly updates to that, but it's generally minor. This is the more detailed. We're going to come back to the games in a little bit, but first, the deep dive, the behind the scenes. This time is going to be what my schedule generally looks like. I'm not exactly a full-time YouTuber, but I'm actually pretty close, and considering that I put in 45 hours a week, you have to consider that full-time. This is not my career, though. I'm lucky. I'm very fortunate that my wife and I own a daycare. It's an in-home daycare. It's in this home. For those who have followed the channel for a long time would know that as of 2.5 years ago, the kids were very close by to where I was recording, and you would often hear them. Now it's on the opposite end of the house, and hearing them is quite the rarity. For me personally, though, that business, the daycare, is the primary one with which I pay my bills. This is very much a growing secondary trend that is actually growing rapidly of late. The pay side that comes with that is starting to tick up to a respectable level. But as for the daycare, I'm the director. I run the daycare. I run the business side of things. When we have events, I'm hosting. When we have tours, I'm giving the tours. So I handle all the business side of things. That is my primary job, but that job does not require full-time commitment. In fact, it's a light part-time commitment, and it's because of that that I'm able to do this on the side. So here's what a typical day looks like for me. The daycare is open Monday through Friday, and so I tie my hours generally into those daycare hours. Monday through Friday, I wake up just after 6 a.m., go through my morning routine. Most days, I get started on channel business around 8 o'clock. For the next 7 hours, from 8 a.m. till 3 p.m., I'm committed to recording, generally about 90% of the time. 10% of the time handling business matters. That already is more than 30 hours a week and already constitutes a full-time job. That's just the first element of what I do with my day. In addition to running the business and being a content creator, I'm also a coach at school. And so we have our calendar that is from fall through spring. I've just finished the spring season and am entering my summer period. I have one more obligation, actually tomorrow, one more obligation, and I will be complete for the year until the middle of this next August. So I'll have a couple months off. That's generally all it is, but there's that little bit of transition where it becomes about 2.5 months or closer to 3 for me on the coaching side, where I get to relax. But otherwise, it's a year-round gig for me with volleyball, girls basketball, boys basketball, and track, where I'm the head coach of each of those sports. Now, during that 9 months of the year, on average, it varies. Game days are different than practice days. On average, that's a 3 to 6 p.m. commitment. Some of the sports, we actually have morning practice. Generally, it's an afternoon one, and the time constraints are mostly the same. It's just what portion of the day I slot that into. 6 p.m. and beyond, I would love to reserve for family time, spend time with my wife, and I do, for the most part, reserve that time. I have a lot of evening commitments, living life normally and trying to have what resembles a normal life. But it is in that window of the evenings where I mix in the other component of what I need to do. Now, sometimes I'll try to get some of this done, especially before that 3 p.m. when I leave for coaching. That eases the burden quite a bit, but I have to edit videos. On average, I'd say each video takes upwards of half an hour to edit. And then I have to go through and render those. Now, the rendering process for me is a few clicks and then it happens on its own. But one, the computer, that's kind of a downtime for the computer. Not completely, but I certainly can't record at that time. And two, I can't render more than one video at a time. It's very much a one video process. And I go very, very heavy into the quality side of my renderings. The files are quite massive, and I commit a whole lot of GPU power towards that process, likewise CPU power, to make that happen and make those videos of a high quality. Once the rendering is done, which depending on the video, it varies wildly on how long that takes. Some of my videos are as short as 20 minutes, some are as long as 40 minutes. So length obviously matters, but how much time lapse is involved actually will greatly impact what the length of time that it is in order to render a video. That can generally take upwards of an hour to complete. And generally, once I've started that process, especially when I'm doing it in evenings, I'm walking away, having dinner, watching TV with my wife or going out and doing something. And then at some point, I come back to the office, I sit down for a minute, and I begin uploading those videos, entering the information that goes with that. The uploads themselves generally take anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes. Entering information for me generally takes about 10 minutes. Every once in a while, there's extras to do, such as coming up with what goes in the info box or entering tags for new series, responding to comments. All of that adds up certainly as well. And generally, a lot of the respond to comments or looking up new games, I will do that within that window of the daytime, that 7-hour window where I'm recording. I'll usually do that in between recordings, giving myself a little bit of a break so it's not continuous. But to edit, render, and post, and again, the render portion of that is away from the computer, and I don't count that in the time, but the time that I am having to sit in front of the computer and work to get 2 videos uploaded on a daily basis is 1 to 2 hours nightly. That's my Monday through Friday routine. Now on the weekends, I try, keyword is try, to not have to do any extra work for the channel. However, I do put out daily videos, so the edit and render side and post side overlaps, rolls into the weekends, so that 1 to 2 hours is also typical of a Saturday or Sunday for me. That doesn't add up to be too bad. Where I try to avoid weekend work doesn't always work out for me. If I have many vacations, if I have a busy particular day, if I have a new release, things will roll into my weekend. On average, I'd say I put in anywhere from 2 to 6 hours total. Long days do exist on my weekends occasionally, and I've had last 2 weekends in a row where I've had 4 to 6 hours each weekend day. In total, on average, my typical week in terms of what I put into the channel is 45 to 50 hours. The coaching, 15 to 20 hours, and the business, 15 to 20 hours. Overall, that balance between them can certainly add up to be more, but overall, that balance adds up to a 70-hour work week every single week for me, year-round, outside of when I go on vacation. There comes a time where I squeeze in extra work. I push that 70 hours up to about 80, 75 to 80 anyway, and push to get ahead. Shorter episodes, this, that, or the other thing, squeezing those few extra hours in, squeezing those weekend days in to prepare to be out of town for 4 days, 5 days, 10 days, 17 days earlier this year when my wife and I went to her home in the Philippines. And so with at least half of my time, and generally a bit more than that, I'd say closer to 60% or even 2/3 of my time, it's a lot. It's a lot to keep up with the channel. On to coverage of the games. It's been a 7-week stretch since the last deep dive that I did, which isn't that long ago. But this has been a major turnover period with a lot of new series. In fact, it's this couple week stretch that I'm in right now that is my busiest time of the year, with the release of Pro Cycling Manager, Tour de France, Tennis Manager, all coming within about a week of each other. It's a hectic time on my personal schedule. With the conclusion of my Pro Cycling Manager series, as well as the introduction of my PCM 23 series, let's begin there. This is the big one on the channel, and in PCM 22, the past structure was Super Prestige. Now, the ranking system should ultimately be the same. I'm going to verify that it is that before I really get hardcore into what my points are on PCM 23, but I suspect that it'll be the same because they absorbed 3 ranking systems into one, and the one is the one that I was using, which previously was known as Super Prestige. All I take is Super Prestige, the team score, divide by 10. Just drop that last digit and it gives me what my grand total is. So as we were just finishing up the PCM 22 career mode, I finished that one with 8,180 something points. Dropping that last digit gives us a score of 818. That final score actually was not our best season as the previous season, where I had more influence, more impact, did not quick sim as much, was more involved. We managed to get a score of 841 out of 1,000 on a previous season. With my other series having just finished up into this week, the final score on the Dragons series was 389 points. Again, same scoring, same scale. Previous season was 475. So we were actually better in Continental Pro than we were in World Tour. And that was derived from the schedule that we had. The Continental Pro races that we had, a full calendar-wise, we won a ton of them. When we moved up to World Tour and then quick simmed the entire season, bar a few races, well, on paper, the results just weren't there anymore. And especially against the World Tour teams. It showed how we were a bit inferior. Now, given time, focusing in on the races themselves, I could see us easily eclipsing that 475, but not with the way it was. Tennis Manager, of course, has just gotten started for us this year. I used the same scoring system last year as I have this year, as the core of the game remains the same. My score comes from 4 categories. Those 4 being the facilities, 5 points for each one we have. And of course, we started with a decent amount of facilities. And so that, the 15 ticked off boxes that we had, gave us a pretty decent start in score. But there's, it's just shy of 75. I think it's like 72 facility upgrades to complete eventually. Another component of our score is rank, and that is World Tour rank of our highest rated player on the team, starting with a count back from 100 on down. So as you increase to the first rank, you'll get 100 points. As you reach 100 in the rankings, that's where we'll start getting on the scoring. Grand Slams. Each victory earns 25 points. Doesn't matter which member of my team pulls that off. But for every Grand Slam, we pick up 25 points for a maximum of 300 points. And then finally, we have the team reputation. For each half star that we build the team reputation, as in our star rating or our tennis ball rating compared to the others, there's ultimately 10 levels of this, 10 points for each half. Last week, a couple weeks into the series, we begin at 95 points on that one, so we're really still just getting underway. We've got a long ways to go to reach 1,000 on that. My record when it comes to Tennis Manager was in 2021, where I got to exactly 700 points. 2022 was actually just shy of that at 691. So my first target is going to be trying to eclipse both of those series, but I'd love to see us get well over 800 or 900 points this time around. I'm really enjoying how well balanced the game is this time. So I have every indicator that I'm going to be going pretty deep for the run this time around. In F1 Manager, my score comes from 5 different areas. First one is facility upgrades. Maximum, of course, is the 75 upgrades. 2 points for each upgrade, so that's 150 points available in upgrades, and we're close to fully upgraded now. We're at 72 upgrades. Our 73rd and 74th upgrade are currently being constructed and will be finished fairly soon. And then we have our team prestige. I take that team prestige and divide by 10, assuming that about 1,000 is the maximum prestige you can get, so that's going to add up to about 100 points. Our current prestige is 842, so 84 points that I get for that one. The driver rating is the other category. Average rating between the two. They're each at an 82 right now, so we have 82 points for that. One that ticks up is our championships. Both constructors and drivers championships are 30 points for each one that we earn. We've had a constructors championship last season, so we have 30 points in that area. The final one, I've actually recalculated this now twice. One is our constructors points. So in the constructors championship, and this is a huge chunk of our active score over the course of a season. Now I've changed how this score works twice because, well, the first time the rule set in the game was voted on and changed. They changed the points being handed out from top 10 with that 25 down to 1 down to 10 points for first, and only 8 drivers scoring points. We had 10, 8, 6, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But then we went back to the old scoring system after just one season. Now I had to recalculate when they went down to that 10 scale to just individual points, straight points across the board. When we went back to the new scoring system, I initially forgot that we were previously on for every to divide by 2, to divide it in half. As a result, our score was a little higher than it was supposed to be, and I picked up on it going, wait a second, we're going to blow past 1,000. Went back and looked at my rule set and went, oh, and had to recalculate. But by then, the previous maximum score that I established a couple weeks back of 733 points, largely influenced by that constructor's score. Now, with a divide by 2, we have 569. I do think we are going to eclipse that 733 over the course of this season, and it won't be a big deal. But at some stage, I might have to just call 569 our current record score, because I don't know. Actually, no, we now have eclipsed our score from last season. Our score last season was 489, so we are higher than that. I might actually just go in and recalculate that and put the game where it belongs. Chef Life is one of the more complex scores that I came up with, and I come up with all of these scores myself. I just look at the game. Some of them are simple. Some of them are so easy to figure out. Pro Cycling Manager, Super Prestige, you can get around 10,000 points, and so it makes sense that, hey, you can find that as 1,000. It's already calculating that for you. Certain games like Europa Universalis 4 have a scoring system ingrained within the game that translates to just equate that to 1,000. Whatever multiplier or, whatever you have to do to recalculate that score as 1,000 is quite simple. Other games have no scoring system whatsoever, and so I have to get creative. I have to look at the mechanics of the game. I have to look at what is recorded data-wise for the game and translate that into a score. And I'll often sit down when I start a game and start jotting down what are the elements of the game that are being recorded, and then what is your start point, what is your end point, and start figuring out that would probably be roughly this many points. And then all of a sudden I'm at 1,400, and I recalculate and I shave off this one and go, you know what, this one's really the same thing as the other one, eliminate it, and then eventually I get myself at what 1,000 points would look like. So it's It's really just an internal process that I go through to decide what are the most important game elements of completion. What would be mastering the game? What would be the ultimate completion point? But the most important thing of all is not just going from 0 to 1,000 once completing the game. How can you start the game and then finish the game, and how do you complete steps along the way that provide a score? Because I don't want just a simple check mark. Now you have 500 points. And one more check mark, there's 1,000. I want to measure progress. And so that's one of the important components that I look for in the scores. Chef Life is one of the more complex ones that I've come up with 6 different elements that are used. The recipes. Each recipe unlocked is a point, but they go through 4 different stages. They go through 4 different level of recipe. So for each recipe will ultimately be times 4 in its score eventually, depending on where it's at. Now, completing the experience to upgrade does not mean I level it up until I've actually gone through and upgraded that recipe and learned it. That's when I apply that next point. But realistically, each recipe is starting as a single point and then having to go through upgrades. Now, some of them you unlock, they unlock already at higher levels. So if it's unlocking at the Bistronomic, it's unlocking at level 3. So a new recipe there comes in right away at 3 points. But that's a small chunk out of 1,000. The staff is a very important component of trying to level them up and getting them to max. We have 3 members of staff. I apply 2 points for each level. So maximum level of 20 means a combined score of 40 for each staff member. Overall, that gives us 120 points for our staff. My personal level, my chef, 5 points for every level that we level up, currently at level 26. Everything that you do in the game could go right out the window if you don't have customers. Your customer base is a massive element to the game, and so I felt it was imperative that I include that one as well. But not just getting to the artificial fillers where you have 5 recipes on the menu today, therefore you have a big boost in customers because you have diversity of menu. No, it's the regulars. It's the core fans. So I want to push that one all the way up to its maximum, which eventually will be 20. 5 points for each of those. That'll add up to 100 points. Right now we're at 15. On the side, there are events. I thought there was going to be more events than there really are. I had 20 extra points kind of stuffed in with staff, and I think that's going to come away from the events points eventually. But right now, I have 3 points for every event, and those are those personal events. Those are what level up your staff. Those are what levels up our outside, like, influencer, the guy whose mom used to own the restaurant. Those story events. 3 points for each of those. Right now we've completed 11 of them. We've completed a lot of minor events, and it's hard for me to go back and determine what are the actual story events and what are the side events, but I have figured out in our dashboard kind of where we get those proper check marks, and if it's not shown up as those check marks, I'm not adding it in. Last one, Steam achievements. I don't go on the Steam achievements very often for my scores, but things seemed missing and I wasn't finding the points that I needed or wanted. And I was like, when I was coming up with a score, I wasn't quite sure how to score the game. And I was like, well, what says game completion more than finishing all the achievements on Steam? For a lot of people, that's their go-to, that's their benchmark. Get all the achievements a game has, and you've mastered the game. Well, so I decided to throw that one in here as well. 5 points for every achievement. Right now I have 20 out of right about 40 for that game. So realistically, we're about halfway through the game. Current score, 540 out of 1,000. Sounds about right. We're about halfway through the game. Last of the current games that I'm going to cover is Football Manager 2023 and the new Youth Factory series. Of course, Newton Heath also finished up over the previous cycle. Newton Heath finished with a grand total of 441 points. But as we're just getting started on Youth Factory, our first season wrapped up with just 42 points. Now, this is also one of the more complex scores that I've ever come up with. Here's the simple portion, though. Half of the points come from what league we are playing in. I'm always starting as a lower league manager. So whenever I do Football Manager, I'm starting from a low division and then trying to climb the ladder. As you climb the ladder, you have a base score for the league that you play in every season. Starting at the bottom, there is no base score. It starts at 0. Eventually, Premier League comes with a base score of 500 points. That's half your total. Points earned in a season, which of course resets every season, so it starts at 0, and so we see scores go up and then drop down, and see scores go up, then drop down over and over again. But in Football Manager, I have a 1-to-1 scale for points scored. But then there's other tournaments. No matter what the league is that you're in, there's almost always other tournaments. In England, of course, the primary one is the FA Cup. But then that's not all there is. You could be in the Champions League. You could be in the Europa League. Could be in the Conference League. Could be in the FA Trophy or the League Cup or the Community Shield. So there's a lot of other side tournaments. The smaller the tournament, as in less reputable, less points there's going to be on offer. Bigger the tournament, the greater the points on offer. A lot of those tournaments, I give double points for group stage, but then whatever points you earn there change as you go into knockout stages. And knockout stages will have points applied based on the round or how deep you get into the tournament. The biggest tournament of all, of course, is the Champions League. To win the Champions League, it's 200 points. So let's say you score 100 points in league on a season. That's a really good season. We've seen it. Wrexham, Notts County both got over 100 this year. Further down the leagues, but 100 points in a season. Okay, it's achievable. 80s, 90s, that's more normal. But let's say you get 100. You're in the Premier League, that's 500. So there's 600. Win the Champions League, there's 200 more. That's still only 800 points. That still is not a perfect season. But throw in the FA Cup, there's 100 points. It's a 900 point season. A treble with 100 points is still only a 900 point season. League Cup worth 75. Community Shield worth 25. There is a path to get to 1,000, but it's going to take a near perfect season, and it's going to take a lot more than what even Manchester City pulled off this year to make that happen. Football Manager, of course, is a very popular game, but it's also a very popular game to put out content for content creators. And as I'm so far down that pecking order, and the general size of my channel is small, and Football Manager is just another component of that. And producing videos are time consuming. I often have to not get to the point of completion with series. So as of right now, I still have yet to win at Football Manager. I have in the past for myself, but not here, not on the channel. I'm really hoping that Youth Factory, which is off to a great start, will have enough support for me to properly climb that ladder. I've gotten up to the higher tiers, but I've always had series that either stall out or just the viewership falls away. Newton Heath was going great, viewership fell away. It had gotten too easy. So it's hard to balance. It's got to be challenging to be interesting. If it gets too easy, we get too successful, it falls away. But ultimately, I want to be successful one of these times so that we can get up there in score. Right now, the highest score that I've ever achieved in Football Manager was my Youth Factory series from last year, from FM22, with a score of just 576. That was one that was in Norwegian football, and we had just reached the top tier but we didn't perform at the top tier. So we had that 500 base, and then we ultimately picked up 76 points across all competitions, the performance in the league, and the tournaments that we were involved in. We survived. We didn't get relegated. We were an okay-ish average team, but we had just reached that top level and had not yet gotten there. But that one actually came at the end of the FM22 cycle, and so I never got a chance to finish it out. I also have a late start on Youth Factory this year, so it is going to take an effort to keep it going, to keep getting through the seasons and keep it interesting. But unlike Newton Heath, throwing money, it's sports washing. It's disgusting, and I hate sports washing. And so it made that series hard to continue. Youth Factory comes with its own advantages, its own strength, but developing from within, that's where the sport's exciting for me. Starting in the 11th tier, starting with challenges, starting with the worst team and no reputation, that's where the sport's interesting for me, the game's interesting for me. So I really hope that it remains interesting for others so that we can grow and change and see that series get to the Premier League, get to Europe, and win some competitions. Maybe not get 1,000, but if we, get 900 plus, that would be awesome. That is going to do it for this deep dive, though. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy what you see here. I do put a lot of time into not only the channel, as you've seen, but into this side content as well. For me, it's a motivator. It's an extra element to keep me going, to keep me at it, because I'm a numbers guy. I'm a stats guy. As a kid, I sat around with notebook after notebook after notebook of personal stats of games that I made up on my own. I'd sit around and watch hockey on TV, coffee table in front of me, glass top coffee table, wood rim around it, and I'd use quarters, head side, quarters tail side, and play hockey or play some variation of soccer on the glass top, and I'd keep stats. I had one of those flick basketball games, and I'd play that, and I'd have my NBA league going, and of course the Blazers and the Suns were always winning. Those were my two teams as a kid. Now it's just Blazers because hometown Blazers, but I was always a stats nerd, and it's the stats side of this that keeps me interested, keeps me motivated. It's the smallest element of everything that I do on the channel, but one of these days there's going to be somebody else doing their own gaming decathlon. If I have any influence on that, that's awesome. Enjoy. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there, and bye for now.